For a long time in India, we were in denial of China's power. One of the things I used to constantly say to various audiences is that um, an Indian politician can very happily stand up in front of a audience and say that my arm is being twisted by the United States, and most Indians would feel sympathetic because an ordinary person knows that the more powerful twist the arms of the less powerful. But I used to say that no Indian leader can ever stand up in front of a public and say my arms are being twisted by China, because that would be seen as a sign of weakness. Because how can an equal twist your arms? And I think our problem was we never recognized the growing disparity for a long time. But I think now we probably are going uh, on the other, erring on the other side of exaggerating China's power. I think I would agree actually with you that we have to be a little more skeptical about China's rise at the moment, because the evidence suggests that there's going to be a long period of disequilibrium, and that actually on a variety of global issues, particularly for India, we have the possibility of a range of alliances which give us more space for maneuver. That doesn't mean that there will be issues on which we will not, there will be issues where we'll agree with China, there will be issues where we'll disagree with China. But to me, it appears from the discussion this afternoon that while all of us are worried about China's rise, I don't think we are still very clear as to what to do about it. That is true in the United States. That is certainly true in India. And it would seem to me to be true in Japan as well, that there is not adequate clarity about how to deal either with an even more powerful China, or in fact a China that suddenly gets into crisis. And I think it's that inability of other powers to understand how to deal with China's rise which worries me more than the fact of China's rise. Because I'm not worried when a country as large as China rises. I mean, there are natural consequences, but we are also big. We can also rise. Time is certainly on our side. But I really think the inability, and that is where China's non-transparency is a huge cost. The Soviet Union paid a major price for its non-transparency. More than anything else, it's the inability of a system to deal with its own internal problems because of its non-transparency that creates. And therefore, we should probably hope that China's non-transparency, which is a source of problem for all of us trying to analyze China, may suddenly create a problem for China itself. And that would be the disruptive element, more than international conflict. The real disruptive element, I think, is internal China. I mean, the Cold War ended not because the United States won a war against the Soviet Union. It ended because Soviet Union imploded. And therefore, one should not underestimate, as an Indian, we never underestimate the cost of internal weaknesses. Our biggest enemy is our internal weakness. There is no problem for India which is bigger than its own internal weaknesses. I've never understood why we don't seem to say that about China. Simply because in 20 years, it has recorded 10% growth year on year. So what? That doesn't suggest to me that in the next 20 years, they will continue to do so. And whether they can or cannot, I'm not an astrologer or astronomist or a soothsayer. But I cannot assume, I cannot work on the assumption that they will. And if they don't, then I think the point that Professor Yakushiji is making is that this kind of economic stagnation will have political repercussions. And I think that's the difference between a country like India, which has learned to absorb economic stagnation through political change. Governments get voted out, and political transition is easier. But China has not yet demonstrated a capacity for political transition.